Hi, let's take a look at how to speed up Photoshop, especially when you want to draw without the lag. Let's open the Preferences panel and check a few settings that could help us. In the Tools section, we can uncheck the animated zoom. It is just a cosmetics. Alright, moving down to the File Handling section. Uncheck Save in Background. This slows you down just a tiny bit, but it can be dangerous, especially when you encounter computer breakdown during the Save in Background saving process. Moving down to disable compression of PSD and PSB files. If you turn this off, the saving process will be faster, though it will occupy more space on your storage. Up to you. Logically, the more you compress the file, the longer it takes the processor to finish the task. Performance tab, memory usage. Simply, the image data are being accessed through RAM, random access memory. RAM is something like a very quick storage. The higher you set it, the more data can be accessed at this speed. But it is not just a Photoshop that uses the RAM. If you set it too high, it can cause system instability. Maximum recommended value is 85%. History and cache. On the left, there are 3 presets. On the right, there are some values. Let me explain them in more detail. History states, every action that you performed is saved until it reaches the number of history states specified. The oldest action is then removed. The history state is actually an array of changed pixels, and this array has to be written and stored on your disk. It takes the computing time to perform this action, and subsequently it occupies the space on your storage. The less history states, the more responsive the Photoshop is. Cache levels. Caching stores computed data, so the data doesn't have to be computed again. This speeds up the redraw process. The more level cache is, the more space it will occupy. So, when you are working with a big file, set the cache levels higher. You don't have to care too much about this when you work with the small files. But remember, if you set it too high, it may take the Photoshop longer to load the image. Now, let's talk about the cache tile size. This is the data amount that is being stored and called at a time. When you do have a huge document and you perform a relatively short brushstrokes, you can set the tile size to be very small and it will really speed up the response time, especially when you are drawing, unless your brushstrokes are very big in pixel dimensions. When you do the longer brushstrokes on the huge file, or if you are using filters, you may want to tell Photoshop to use a bigger cache tile size. Graphics processor settings. If you have a dedicated GPU, it can speed up your Photoshop as well, in particular tasks. If you don't have any other programs using a lot of your dedicated GPU power, you can run it in normal or even advanced mode. There is a description in the bottom of the panel of what it speeds up. Just hover over the section. Scratch disks. Yep, this is important. When your RAM is filled up, the Photoshop has to store all the data that it needs to access on your disk. Here, you can specify which disk or disks to use. You know your SSD disk is quicker than your HDD, and both are slower than NVMe disk. The read and write speeds play an important role here. The best option is to have a quick dedicated scratch disk just for this purpose, so the other applications or system doesn't write to it or read from it. Photoshop recommends to have your application installed on your main disk, keep your document on another disk, and have the third disk just for scratch. This is not option for everyone, especially when you are using laptop. So just use the quickest disk that you have and keep as much free space on the disk as possible for Photoshop to use. Sometimes when your computer crashes, the scratch data are not wiped out. I recommend you to do this manually. Don't worry, removing the temp file won't cause any problems. This is the way to speed up your Photoshop by the settings. Check the link on the screen to see how to make Photoshop more responsive just by working with the layers. Thank you very much. See you next time.